Dr. Emma Clark rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the clock on her computer screen. It was almost midnight on the research ship Meridian, floating silently through space near the newly discovered planet Kepler 442c. Most of her colleagues had gone to bed hours ago, but Emma was still working in the laboratory, studying the strange samples they had collected from the planet's surface. The lab was quiet except for the soft humming of machines and the gentle vibration of the ship's engines. Emma liked working alone at night. It helped her think better without the noise and chatter of the day shift. She had been a scientist for 10 years, but these alien specimens were unlike anything she had ever seen before. On her desk sat dozens of small glass containers, each one holding something different from the alien world. Most contained simple things like soil, water, or plant-like materials. But one container was special. Inside was a tiny creature that looked like a small piece of crystal, no bigger than a grain of salt. The other scientists called it a Zephyrian neuroparasite, though Emma thought that name sounded too scary for something so small. What made this creature dangerous was its history. According to their research, similar parasites had completely taken over the minds of 12 different alien species across 4 different star systems. Entire civilizations had fallen under their control within weeks. The creatures would enter a host's body, travel to the brain, and take complete control of their thoughts and actions. The host would become like a puppet, doing whatever the parasite wanted. Emma picked up the container and held it up to the light. The tiny creature inside looked completely still, almost like it was sleeping or dead. She had been studying it for days, trying to understand how something so small could be so powerful. The ship's computer had warned everyone to handle the specimen with extreme care, but Emma was confident in her safety protocols. As she placed the container back on her desk, she noticed something that made her frown. There was a thin crack running along the side of the glass, barely visible unless you looked closely. The crack was new, she was sure it hadn't been there that morning. That's not good, Emma said to herself. She knew she needed to transfer the specimen to a new container immediately. Even though the creature appeared inactive, she couldn't take any chances with a possible containment breach. Emma opened her supply cabinet and pulled out a fresh glass container, along with a pair of special metal tweezers designed for handling dangerous specimens. She put on thick rubber gloves and adjusted her safety glasses. Every movement had to be careful and precise. What Emma didn't know was that the crack in the glass wasn't an accident. The creature inside, which called itself Prime among its own kind, had been very slowly weakening the glass for days. Prime was far more intelligent than the humans realized. It had been watching Emma through the transparent walls of its prison, studying her habits and waiting for the perfect moment to escape. Prime had successfully invaded and controlled thousands of hosts across the galaxy. Each time, the process was the same. Enter the host's body through a small wound or opening, travel through their blood to reach the brain, and then take complete control of their nervous system. It usually took only a few hours, and the host never even knew what was happening until it was too late. Emma carefully picked up the cracked container with her tweezers and began to tilt it slowly toward the new container. She needed to pour the creature and its liquid preservative into the fresh glass without spilling anything. This was a delicate operation that required steady hands. But as she tilted the container, the crack suddenly spread wider. The glass made a tiny popping sound, and a small piece broke away from the side. A few drops of the liquid spilled onto her gloved hand, but Emma thought nothing of it. The gloves were supposed to protect her from exactly this kind of accident. What she didn't realize was that the sharp piece of broken glass had also cut through her rubber glove and made a tiny scratch on the palm of her hand. It was so small that she didn't even feel it happen. A single drop of her blood mixed with the spilled liquid. Prime saw its chance immediately. The microscopic creature moved faster than any human eye could see, slipping through the tiny cut in Emma's skin and entering her bloodstream. For Prime, this was the moment it had been planning and waiting for. Soon, it would have a new host to control. Emma finished transferring what she thought was the complete specimen into the new container and sealed it carefully. She cleaned up the small spill with a special chemical solution and threw away her damaged gloves. Everything seemed normal. She felt no pain from the tiny cut, and she had no idea that anything had gone wrong. As she prepared to leave the laboratory for the night, Emma felt unusually tired. She thought it was just because she had been working late again. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked slowly back to her quarters on the ship. Inside her bloodstream, Prime was already beginning its journey toward Emma's brain. The parasite was confident and excited. After studying humans for days, Prime expected this invasion to be like all the others, quick, easy, and completely successful. Within a few hours, Emma Clark would no longer be in control of her own mind. But Prime had never encountered a human host before. And humans, as Prime was about to discover, were very different from any other species in the galaxy. Prime reached Emma's brain at exactly 3:47 in the morning while she was sleeping in her small cabin aboard the Meridian. The parasite had spent hours traveling through her blood vessels, following the same path it had used successfully thousands of times before with other alien hosts. Prime was confident this would be another easy victory. The parasite began its attack the way it always did. First, it would take control of the host's motor functions, their ability to move their arms, legs, and body. Then it would access their memory centers to learn everything about them. Finally, it would suppress their consciousness completely, leaving Prime in total control of a perfectly functioning body. But something went wrong almost immediately. When Prime tried to connect to Emma's motor control centers, it found something completely unexpected. Instead of finding one clear pathway that controlled movement, Prime discovered dozens of different systems all working together in a chaotic mess. Emma's brain seemed to be constantly arguing with itself about every tiny movement. Even while she slept, her mind was incredibly active. Part of her brain was dreaming about flying through space, while another part was trying to remember if she had locked her laboratory door. At the same time, different sections were planning her breakfast, worrying about her research deadline, and replaying a conversation she had with her mother 3 weeks ago. Prime had never encountered anything like this. With other alien species, the mind was like a well-organized library with everything in its proper place. Emma's mind was more like a busy marketplace with hundreds of people all talking at once about completely different things. When Prime tried to access Emma's memories, the situation got even worse. A simple memory about her childhood birthday party was somehow connected to a scientific formula, which was linked to a song she didn't even like, which reminded her of an argument with her sister, which made her think about what to buy at the grocery store. Prime began to feel something it had never experienced before: confusion. The parasite was designed to take control of organized, logical thought patterns. But Emma's brain didn't seem to follow any logical patterns at all. Emma woke up at 7 in the morning feeling strange. Her head felt heavy and foggy, like she was trying to think through thick soup. But at the same time, she felt unusually alert, as if she could see patterns and connections that had been invisible to her before. Dr. Michael Thompson found her in the laboratory cafeteria, staring at her coffee cup with a puzzled expression. "Good morning, Emma," Michael said as he sat down across from her with his breakfast. "You look tired. Another late night in the lab." Emma looked up at him slowly. "Michael, do you ever feel like your brain is running too many programs at the same time? Like there's too much noise in your head, but somehow you can understand all of it?" Michael raised an eyebrow. Emma was known for asking unusual questions, but this was strange even for her. "Are you feeling all right? You seem a bit scattered this morning." "That's just it," Emma said, taking a sip of her coffee. "I feel scattered, but also more focused than I've ever been. Look at this." She pulled out her tablet and showed him a complex analysis of the alien specimens she had been working on. "I found all these connections in the data last night, patterns I never would have noticed before. It's like I could suddenly see how everything fits together." What Emma couldn't know was that Prime was experiencing its own version of confusion and frustration. The parasite had expected to be in complete control by now, but instead it felt like it was trapped in some kind of mental storm. Every time Prime tried to assert control over one part of Emma's mind, 3 other parts would start doing something completely different. When it tried to focus her attention on one task, her brain would immediately start thinking about 5 other things. When it attempted to organize her thoughts into neat, controllable categories, her mind would create new connections that made no logical sense. Emma spent the morning working in the laboratory, but her behavior was definitely unusual. She would start examining one specimen, then suddenly switch to another, then grab a pencil and start writing equations on a piece of paper, then go back to the first specimen while humming a song under her breath. Dr. Rachel Green, who worked at the desk next to Emma's, noticed the strange behavior. "Emma, are you sure you're feeling okay? You've been talking to yourself for the past hour, and I think you just tried to analyze the same sample 3 different ways at the same time." Emma paused in the middle of adjusting her microscope. "You know what's weird, Rachel? I feel like there's someone else in my head, but not in a scary way. More like having a roommate who's really bad at taking hints about when to be quiet." Inside Emma's mind, Prime was beginning to realize that it had made a terrible mistake. Human consciousness wasn't like the clean, organized thought patterns of other species. It was more like controlled chaos, somehow managing to function despite being completely disorganized. The parasite was designed to feed on clear, logical thoughts. But Emma's mind was full of contradictions, random associations, and thoughts that seemed to bounce around without any clear purpose. Prime was starting to feel weak and confused, like it was trying to drink water from a fire hose. For the first time in its long existence, Prime began to wonder if it had chosen the wrong host. By the third day, Prime was beginning to understand that it had made the worst mistake of its existence. The parasite had successfully conquered advanced civilizations with complex technology and powerful minds, but Emma's brain was proving to be an impossible puzzle. Human consciousness, Prime discovered, was nothing like what it had encountered before. Other alien species had minds that worked like efficient machines. One thought led logically to the next, memories were stored in organized sections, and emotions followed predictable patterns. Emma's mind was completely different. It was like trying to control a tornado while riding inside it. Emma's brain seemed to run on multiple levels at the same time. While she focused on her scientific work, her subconscious was constantly doing dozens of other things. She would analyze the chemical composition of an alien sample while simultaneously planning her lunch, wondering if it might rain tomorrow, remembering a funny joke her friend told her last month, and feeling slightly guilty about not calling her parents recently. Prime tried to understand this chaos, but it was overwhelming. Every time the parasite attempted to follow one train of thought, it would suddenly branch off into 5 completely different directions. Emma could be examining bacteria under her microscope while part of her mind composed an email she needed to send, another part worried about whether she had enough money in her bank account, and yet another part hummed a song that had been stuck in her head for 3 days. "Emma, you're doing it again," Dr. Rachel Green said during their afternoon meeting. She was looking at Emma with concern. "You just solved 3 different math problems while having a complete conversation with yourself about whether cats or dogs make better pets for astronauts." Emma blinked and looked around the conference room as if she had just woken up from a dream. "I did? I don't remember talking about pets." She paused and tilted her head slightly, like she was listening to something only she could hear. "Although, cats would probably adapt better to low gravity. They're already good at landing on their feet." Dr. David Parker, the ship's doctor, leaned forward. "Emma, have you been sleeping well? You seem very distracted lately, like your mind is in several places at once." "That's exactly how it feels," Emma said with surprise. "Like there are multiple conversations happening in my head, but they're not really conversations. More like background noise that somehow makes sense." She touched her forehead gently. "It's strange, but I don't feel sick. I actually feel more creative than usual. I keep seeing connections between things that I never noticed before." What Emma didn't realize was that Prime was trapped in the middle of all this mental activity. The parasite was used to controlling minds that thought in straight lines: problem, analysis, solution, action. But Emma's mind was more like a spider web, with every thought connected to dozens of other thoughts in ways that seemed random but somehow worked perfectly. Prime had never experienced anything like Emma's natural ability to multitask her own consciousness. She could hold completely opposite opinions about the same subject and somehow be comfortable with both of them. She could be excited about her research and worried about failing at the same time. She could feel confident in her abilities while also questioning every decision she made. The parasite found itself being treated like any other unwelcome thought in Emma's head. Her mind seemed to have natural systems for dealing with intrusive thoughts, random worries, and mental noise. Instead of fighting the invasion, Emma's consciousness was unconsciously trying to process Prime like it processed everything else, by thinking about it too much. Emma's brain would notice Prime's presence, examine it from every possible angle, worry about what it might mean, try to categorize it with similar experiences, connect it to completely unrelated memories, and then file it away with all the other thoughts she was managing at the same time. "I've been thinking about thinking," Emma told Dr. Michael Thompson while they worked together in the laboratory. "You know how sometimes you get a song stuck in your head and it just plays over and over? It's like that, but instead of music, it's this weird feeling that someone is trying to have a conversation with me, but they don't speak the same language." Michael stopped what he was doing and looked at her carefully. "That's unusually philosophical, even for you, Emma. Are you sure you're feeling all right?" Emma considered the question with the same complex thought process she applied to everything else. "I feel like my brain is running a new program, but the program doesn't quite know how to work with my existing operating system. Does that make sense?" What made the situation even worse for Prime was Emma's uniquely human tendency to overthink everything. The parasite found itself subjected to Emma's 3 a.m. mental sessions where she would lie in bed analyzing every social interaction from the past week, worrying about problems that might never happen, and replaying embarrassing moments from her childhood. Prime had conquered species with telepathic abilities and hive minds, but none of them had the human capacity to feel anxious about 17 different things while simultaneously trying to remember if they had turned off the coffee maker and wondering what their life would have been like if they had become a musician instead of a scientist. Emma's immune system was also beginning to notice the foreign presence, but instead of attacking it directly, her body seemed to be trying to isolate Prime in small pockets where it was subjected to even more concentrated doses of human mental chaos. The parasite was beginning to starve, not from lack of neural energy, but from the complete impossibility of organizing any of it into something useful. Prime's situation became desperate by the fourth day. The parasite that had once commanded entire star systems now found itself completely overwhelmed by Emma's uniquely human way of thinking. What had started as a simple invasion had turned into psychological torture for the alien creature. Emma's mind seemed designed to worry about everything, and Prime was experiencing all of it secondhand. The parasite found itself trapped in Emma's stream of consciousness during her late-night mental marathons, where she would replay every awkward conversation she had ever had, starting from middle school. At 2 in the morning, while Emma lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Prime was forced to experience her sudden memory of the time she had called her teacher Mom, in front of the entire class when she was 12 years old. Then her mind jumped to worrying about whether she had locked her apartment door back on Earth 6 months ago. Then she started thinking about what would happen if the ship's life support systems failed. Then she remembered she needed to buy toothpaste the next time they docked at a space station. Prime had no defense against this mental chaos. The parasite was designed to feed on organized, logical thoughts, but Emma's brain seemed to specialize in beautiful disorder. She could worry about imaginary problems while solving real ones, feel confident and insecure at the same time, and somehow make important scientific discoveries while her mind was occupied with wondering if penguins ever got cold feet. "Emma, you've been acting very strange," Dr. Rachel Green said during their morning coffee break. "Yesterday I watched you have what appeared to be an argument with yourself about whether it was better to colonize Mars or Europa, while simultaneously calibrating 3 different instruments and humming what sounded like a lullaby." Emma paused with her coffee cup halfway to her lips. "Did I win the argument?" "That's just it. You seem to be arguing both sides equally well, and you appeared to be satisfied with contradictory conclusions." Dr. David Parker, who had been quietly observing Emma's behavior for days, decided it was time to intervene. "Emma, I think we need to talk privately. Your colleagues are getting concerned about your mental state." In Dr. Parker's office, Emma sat fidgeting in her chair, her mind clearly racing even while she tried to sit still. "David, I know I'm acting weird. I can feel it. It's like there's someone else in my head, but they're really bad at being a houseguest. They keep trying to organize my thoughts, but they don't understand that my thoughts don't want to be organized." Prime, meanwhile, was experiencing something no parasite in its species' history had ever endured. Emma's natural anxiety was affecting the creature directly. When Emma worried about her research deadlines, Prime felt the stress. When she felt guilty about not calling her sister, Prime experienced the guilt. When Emma had imposter syndrome and wondered if she was really qualified to be studying alien life forms, Prime shared her self-doubt. The parasite was also discovering that humans had an incredible ability to feel multiple contradictory emotions at the same time. Emma could be excited about a scientific discovery while simultaneously worried that she was wrong, proud of her work while feeling like a fraud, and confident in her abilities while questioning every decision she made. But the worst part for Prime was Emma's tendency to overthink everything. Her brain would latch onto the strange sensations caused by the parasite's presence and then analyze them from every possible angle. She would spend hours trying to figure out what was causing her unusual mental state, considering possibilities ranging from space radiation to alien influence to simply working too many late nights. "I've been thinking," Emma told Dr. Michael Thompson while they worked together in the laboratory. "What if that neural parasite we've been studying isn't as inactive as we thought? What if it somehow got out of its container and is affecting someone on the ship?" Michael looked up from his microscope with concern. "That's a terrifying thought, Emma. But our security protocols would have detected any containment breach. Besides, according to our research, a host would be completely controlled within hours. They wouldn't be able to think about their condition or discuss it rationally." Emma nodded slowly, but Prime could feel her mind filing this information away and continuing to analyze the possibility. Her brain was treating the parasite's presence like a fascinating puzzle to be solved, rather than a threat to be feared. Emma's immune system had also finally identified Prime as a foreign invader. But instead of mounting a direct attack, her body was producing specialized antibodies that seemed designed to isolate the parasite. Prime found itself being quarantined in small sections of Emma's neural tissue, where it was subjected to even more concentrated doses of her chaotic thought patterns. The parasite was beginning to understand why humans had survived and thrived in a dangerous universe. Their minds weren't more advanced than other species, they were more adaptable. They could function despite being complete disasters at mental organization. They could worry about everything and somehow still accomplish their goals. They could hold contradictory thoughts without breaking down. Prime had spent its entire existence conquering minds that made sense. But Emma's mind didn't make sense, it just worked anyway, and that was far more terrifying than any advanced technology or psychic power the parasite had ever encountered. For the first time in its long life, Prime began to consider the possibility that it might not win this battle. Even worse, it was beginning to suspect that Emma was starting to win without even trying. By the end of the second week, Prime was no longer the confident predator that had conquered civilizations. The parasite had been reduced to a desperate, confused creature that spent most of its time trying to hide in the quieter corners of Emma's mind. But even those corners weren't really quiet, Emma's brain seemed incapable of true silence. Prime had tried everything it knew. It had attempted to take control during Emma's sleep, but her dreams were even more chaotic than her waking thoughts. It had tried to influence her during moments of deep concentration, but Emma's focus somehow included thinking about 12 other things at the same time. The parasite had even tried to make Emma sick, hoping that illness might weaken her mental defenses, but her immune system had adapted to treat Prime like a manageable chronic condition. Emma, meanwhile, had become increasingly aware that something unusual was happening in her head. She had started keeping a journal of her strange experiences, analyzing them with the same scientific curiosity she applied to her alien specimens. Day 14 of weird brain feelings, she wrote in her personal log. The sensation of having a mental roommate is getting stronger. It's like someone is trying to redecorate my thoughts, but they have terrible taste in furniture. Also, I solved that protein synthesis problem that's been bothering me for months, so maybe my uninvited guest isn't entirely useless. Dr. David Parker had been monitoring Emma's condition closely, and he was growing more concerned each day. Her behavior was becoming increasingly erratic, but in ways that seemed almost creative rather than harmful. She would have conversations with herself that sounded like debates between two different people, but both sides of the argument were clearly coming from her own mind. Prime's breaking point came during one of Emma's late-night overthinking sessions. As she lay in bed, her mind began its usual routine of analyzing every possible thing that could go wrong in her life. She worried about her research, her career, her relationships, her health, the heat death of the universe, and whether she had remembered to water her plants before leaving Earth 6 months ago. But this time, Emma's thoughts took an unexpected turn. "You know," she said aloud to her empty cabin, "if there really is something else in my head, it must be having a terrible time. I can barely handle my own thoughts sometimes. I can't imagine what it would be like for someone else to be stuck in here with all this chaos." Prime felt something it had never experienced before, a moment of connection with its host. Emma wasn't just thinking about the possibility of mental invasion as a scientific problem. She was actually feeling sympathy for whatever might be trapped in her mind. That night, Prime managed to make contact with Emma through her dreams. It was a desperate attempt, using the last of its strength to project simple concepts and images into her sleeping mind. The dream was strange even by Emma's standards. She found herself in a vast library where all the books were trying to reorganize themselves, while a small, crystalline creature held up signs that read "Help" and "Please," and "Your mind is exhausting." Emma woke up with perfect clarity about what was happening to her. "Oh," she said, sitting up in bed. "Oh, you poor thing. You're actually in there, aren't you? And you have no idea how to deal with the way human brains work." Over the next few days, Emma worked with Dr. Michael Thompson and Dr. Rachel Green to confirm her suspicions. They ran detailed brain scans and found evidence of foreign neural activity that was clearly struggling to integrate with Emma's natural thought patterns. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Thompson said, studying the scan results. "The parasite appears to be actively trying to escape from your neural tissue. I've never seen anything like it." Emma found herself in the surreal position of trying to communicate with her own mental parasite. During quiet moments, she would focus her thoughts and try to project simple messages. The response she received was immediate and desperate, images of confusion, exhaustion, and what could only be described as homesickness. "All right," Emma said during one of these mental conversations. "I think I understand what you want. You want out of my head, and honestly, I'd like to have my brain to myself again. But first, we need to make a deal." The negotiation took place entirely in Emma's mind, with her colleagues watching as she appeared to have a complex discussion with herself. Emma's terms were simple: Prime would share everything it knew about the alien species it had encountered, their technologies, their weaknesses, their locations, and their capabilities. In return, Emma would help the parasite leave safely and make sure it could warn its own kind to stay away from humans. Prime agreed immediately, flooding Emma's mind with information about dozens of civilizations across the galaxy. But along with the data came a desperate message that Prime was already transmitting to every member of its species within range. Warning to all Zephyrian neural parasites. Avoid human hosts at all costs. Species designation, dangerous. Unpredictable. Mental chaos levels beyond acceptable parameters. Thought patterns incompatible with standard control methods. Recommend immediate avoidance. Classification, do not engage. Dr. Rachel Green developed a procedure to safely extract Prime using a combination of targeted electromagnetic fields and Emma's own focused meditation. As the parasite was finally separated from her neural tissue and placed in a secure containment unit, Emma felt a strange sense of loss mixed with relief. "How do you feel?" Dr. Thompson asked as Emma sat up from the medical table. Emma smiled and stretched, feeling like herself for the first time in weeks. "I feel wonderfully, chaotically, perfectly human again."